Well, what I said earlier on a brief effort certainly turned out to be true, and with respect to my efforts, uh, somewhat compromised by a wiring detail. But before the magic ended about that, and I got rid of that recording, uh, there was a response about ice machines and microphones and uh, sharing and so on. And I was tempted to point out that, with digital technology now, the idea of not being able to originate a clean recording um, very easily, inexpensively, no matter what ambience is a special factor, is really ridiculous. I'm tempted to get specific, but uh, what I was talking about and referred to was, you know, the gravity of the situation upon the designing of a new hospital for Walter Reed. Um, as opposed to a Huey Long kind of deal or anything of the sort. Another tall building where none is really needed, although I wouldn't be averse to one thing or another. It's more relaxed to do without even the potential of some serious stuff. The gravity of the situation now is that people who depend on war or preparing for war or cleaning up after war is apparent. They are scavenging, and that's led also to the elimination of some potentials and favoring of others. And in terms of my situation, being obviated is not without repercussions while people consider what new incentives to develop ways to correct errors, to detect errors, if not correct errors. Sometimes errors are more easily uh, corrected, except that they are less likely to be detected. But flipping that around, I know how it is now that I'm not one to worry about. I said lighten up. You don't necessarily have to lower your voices or go to the next room when your coffee pot's plugged in. I have one I haven't even gotten out of the box. If you think out of the box, though, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to uh, overcoming traditional uh, environmental concerns. And sure enough, there was a reaction even before I could post the one that I couldn't really share. I meant for a certain amount of garbledness, but not to the extent that I found I had created. But yeah, I just have been kind of rethinking. I don't know whether a restart is necessary after certain things have happened. We seem to have, in an approximate way, we seem to have revisited um, some problems like 9/11. Um, but I have to say, I've heard more sanctimony recently than I did back then. I think that's because people are highly resolved not to get into what some people prefer at the slightest opportunity, and that involves, people who are encouraged uh, to do bad things. I know, for example, looking into the death of Martin Luther King, we find, don't we, that media back then was not helpful. It isn't so much a matter of censorship as it is a lack of creativity. If people can't create good stuff in media, then it's not exactly censorship, is it? Although some would understand that if you back away from that and look at a larger picture, and you find out that feeble people are in uh, key positions, then something can be said. You know, there is such a thing as the Peter principle, and it still is viable, although sometimes it's not explained very well. But I was just thinking of the Keystone State. What is the keystone now for? Column inches, texting, and some voice and camera work? The keystone now, if not an aqueduct or a cathedral, is the smartphone. And people seem to be taking it for granted in a way, and they don't see any real reason to make an effort to push back against mediocrity. But there's someone, in Southern Europe willing to do that now. Something of a transplant, one I never expected. It turns out, though, that he was chosen long before the death of Francis, and that cuts both ways. Um, but it's hard to sweep back the tide, you know? It's hard to sweep back the tide, and if we compare a situation in terms of technology to a kind of meltdown, then that means that there are places like the Maldives that might be swamped in the result, you might say. And I'm muddling around like I think might be good, stroke by stroke. Some are heard around the world, one move after another. And I have my differences because, we can agree, I think, on some fundamentals, and then disagree on what should follow from the same starting point. It's like some of those amazing signposts that people took pictures of. That the signposts had been put up during World War II at a crossroads with arrows pointing with mileage. So many 100 miles to Tokyo, many 100 miles to Moscow, so many 100 miles to London or Washington or Madrid or for that matter Rio de Janeiro or the Maldives in particular. Just in terms of one restart or another, we have those signposts on every continent. And we have some people determined to keep the internet going, even though we haven't solved the problem of who gets to call the shots in what remains now only a few areas of petty interest, as opposed to fundamental policy determinations. And that calls for a lot of I told you so's by those who think that executive expertise is sometimes more needed than any given uh, executive. Yeah, we should have a surfeit of talent, yet the illusion is that we don't. That illusion is maintained by people who are good at maintaining make believe, and make believe has been burnished for thousands of years, and people put great stock in some of it, and maybe a restart along the way over the last many thousands of years might not be improvident. On the other hand, a restart every day is what you don't want in your family car. The starter will wear out and you'll get nowhere if something is really wrong with what you're doing. Many people do something really wrong when they just simply try to restart an engine that is evidently not going to start. Others think, that's just the way to treat people. Ideas start like, for example, the idea of having a button uh, on a device in a car that will disable a nearby car electronically. Well, I'm glad to say people tried that and found out that that wouldn't be a good idea. They've come up with some other plans that haven't been fully deployed and made popular. But anyway, we have a lot of problems. A 10-lane highway is itself a serious failure. And we seem to have something like that in terms of group thinking, There's some things to change now that seem so, uh, what, formidable that nobody even wants to try to make the difference. They see certain problems as inviting a futile attempt to sweep back the tide on the Maldives or anywhere else, in the Maldives, or whatever. But it's not that bad. And a certain transplant of executive authority based on experience just might be noticed by some other useful idiots as well as their superiors as some candle in the wind. But not necessarily one burning for Diana or bewitched Susanna or Jackie. Virologists know that we could have a pandemic worse than COVID if things really get out of hand. Others know that smallpox is essentially gone, although there's more to be said about that, particularly while people are looking for other ways to solve problems. Another problem, as far as I'm concerned, is the carceral state has been holding innocent children hostage to commuters in places where people are paid low wages but enough to have a mortgage, and therefore the kids get shortchanged. That's why this illusion of scarcity is obnoxious, and we ought to do better for kids. A plane flight and a boat ride and another plane ride, whether somebody is terminal or not. We have a lot of people with terminal degrees, and they might need to be unplugged. Although, when people are plugged in, there can be an uproar like there was when Bob Dylan had some problems with his fans. But I have no problem with Joe Namath either in terms of senior staff.